My grandfather used to say that the men in our family loved too much. He said it like it was a virtue, like it explained everything. The slammed doors, the long silences. My grandmother who never left the house without telling him exactly where she was going and exactly when she would be back. He said it the way other men might say we have weak hearts, or we go grey early. A family trait, something carried in the blood. I believed him for a long time. My name is Edward. I grew up in a quiet house at the edge of a quiet town, the kind of place where everyone knew which families were respectable and which were not. We were respectable. My father saw to that. He was a calm man, soft-spoken, the sort people called devoted. He was devoted the way a lock is devoted to a door. My mother rarely went out. When she did, she came home early. She apologized often for things that needed no apology. If my father's face so much as tightened, she would reach across the table and take his hand and say she was sorry. She hadn't meant to upset him. She would be more careful next time. I never once heard him raise his voice. That was the thing I could never explain to anyone. He never shouted. He never threatened. He never had to. My mother lived inside an invisible shape he had drawn around her, and she called that shape love, and she seemed, this is the part that took me years to understand, she seemed content inside it, as if there had never been any other way to live. Once, when I was older, I asked her if she had ever wanted to leave. Not him, just the house, just for a while. She looked at me like I had asked her if she wanted to stop breathing. "Why would I want that?" she said. And she meant it. There was one moment, only one, that didn't fit. I was young. I came into the kitchen early one morning and found her at the window, very still, looking out at the road. And for just a second, her face was different. Awake, like a woman remembering she had once wanted to go somewhere. Then she heard me, and it closed over again, the way water closes over a dropped stone. She smiled and asked if I was hungry. I didn't understand what I'd seen. I was too young. It was only years later when I read the journal that I understood I'd watched my mother surface for a single breath and then go back under. The journal came to me the winter my father died. We were clearing the upstairs rooms, the ones that had been shut for years, when I found the tin box behind a loose panel in his old study. Inside was a book bound in cracked leather, swollen with age. At first, it seemed almost disappointingly ordinary. Weather, accounts, the price of grain, births, marriages, deaths. Several different hands, all writing down the same small facts in the same careful way. My father's hand was there. Before his, my grandfather's. And beneath them all, in ink faded to the color of weak tea, the first one. Cornelius. For a while, I nearly missed what the book was. The others had missed it completely. They had owned it for generations, carried it from house to house, kept it like an heirloom no one really had to open. There were notes in the margins, but lazy ones. Old man's nonsense. One of them had written beside a passage that should have frightened him. I think now they could not see it. To recognize what Cornelius had written, you would have to feel, even faintly, that something in it was wrong. My father never had. My grandfather never had. The book had been telling them the truth for years, and every one of them had mistaken it for a family resemblance. I did not. I read on. And about halfway through the journal in Cornelius's own hand, the record changed. He had loved a woman. He writes about her the way you'd write about good news. He doesn't think there is anything wrong with a single word of it. That is the thing I could not get past, reading it. He is not confessing. He is explaining. He loved her so much, he writes, that he could not eat. He loved her so much that he followed her through the town to see who she spoke to. He loved her so much that when she told him, gently and then less gently, that she would never be his, something in him simply refused to accept it. He did not write it like a man describing a crime. He wrote it like a man describing a devotion. That was the first time, sitting in that cold room, that I felt I was reading about myself. It was a hard time to live where he lived. He doesn't say the year, but you can feel it in the pages. The fear in that town, thick as smoke. Neighbors watching neighbors. The wrong word in the wrong ear and you'd be standing in front of men who had already decided what you were. Everyone looking for the devil in everyone else. And in the middle of all that fear, Cornelius went looking for a woman people only spoke about in whispers, a woman who lived past the edge of things, past where the church's light reached. He went to her the way a drowning man goes anywhere. He wanted, he writes, a way to make the woman he loved stay, not love him. He had given up on love. He wanted her to stay. The woman past the edge of town told him it could be done, but the binding needed bone. The hip bone of a woman, she said. Nothing else would hold it. Cornelius writes about what he did next, the way you would write about a chore. 3 short lines. He went out to where the dead were kept, on a night with no moon, and he took what he needed, and he brought it back. He does not dwell on it. He does not seem troubled by it. He needed the bone, so he got the bone. He loved her, after all. The woman worked it into a ring, pale, smooth, carved with lines too fine to be an accident, and she told him 2 things. The first, he wrote down carefully. Place it on the hand of the one you want. The second, he underlined the only underlined words in all those pages. It will not make her love you. It will only make her forget that she ever didn't. It went wrong before he could use it. I had to read this part twice, because the journal goes strange here, the handwriting fast and pressed down. The grave he had opened did not stay quiet. Someone noticed the disturbed earth, and in a town already sick with fear, already hunting for something to burn, that was all it took. The fear had been looking for a door. Cornelius had opened one. It moved fast after that, faster than he could have wanted. The town turned, the way a held breath finally lets go. And the first one they came for, the first one they took, was the woman past the edge of town. The one who had made the ring. She was the beginning of it, the first of many. By the time it was over, that town would have a great deal of blood on its hands. But she was the first, and Cornelius knew, writing it down years later, that he was the reason. He had gone to her door, and he had led the fear straight to it. He does not write this with much grief. That is the part that chills me most, even now. He is sorry the way you are sorry about bad weather. An unfortunate thing. A waste. He ran. He had a little money, and he used it. He went far, to a place where no one knew his name or his face or anything he had done. A new town. A fresh start, as men like him always believe they deserve. He set himself up well, respectable, the kind of man people are glad to have move in next door. And the ring was still in his pocket. He had never used it. The woman he'd loved, the one it had all been for, he had left her behind in the burning town, and he would never see her again. So, in his new life, in his new respectable house, Cornelius did the thing our family has done ever since. He fell in love again. And this time, he had the ring. There is one more thing he wrote, near the end of his part, and I think it is the most important thing in the whole book, though no one after him seems to have understood it. He got frightened. Years in, with the ring already doing its quiet work, Cornelius began to feel that something was wrong. Not with her. With the whole arrangement. He doesn't say exactly what frightened him, but he writes that he decided he wanted to know how to undo it. Just in case. A careful man, planning for weather. So he went back. Not to the same town, he could never go back there. But he went looking for the woman who had made the ring, not understanding or not letting himself understand that she had been dead for years, that he had helped kill her. He writes about the journey as if she might simply be there, waiting, ready to teach him the way out. He found the place where she had lived. It was gone, burned to the ground long before. Black timber and ash and weeds growing up through it. Whatever she had known about unmaking the thing she made, how to break the binding, how to let the bound one go, it had gone into the fire with her. There was no one left who knew the way out. Cornelius writes one last line about it, and then the subject never comes up again, not in his hand or any hand after his. I will simply have to be careful and love her well and hope it is enough. It was not a thing you could be careful with, and love was the disease, not the cure. I should tell you that I did not believe any of it, not at first. I sat in that cold upstairs room and told myself it was the diary of a disturbed man, a family that had passed its sickness down like an heirloom and dressed it up in ghost stories so it wouldn't have to feel ashamed. There was no curse. There was only a long line of men who had hurt the people foolish enough to love them, and one of them, the first, had happened to write it down. That is what I told myself. But by then I had already met Sarah, and by then the first thing had already happened. I should tell you about her before I tell you what I did to her. She deserves that much. She deserves to be more in this account than the woman it happened to. I met Sarah in my second year of university in the most ordinary way there is. We reached for the same book in a library, and both apologized too much, and then laughed at how much we'd apologized. And that was it. That was the beginning. She was the easiest person I have ever known. Not simple, easy. She moved through the world like she trusted it, and being near her, I started to trust it too. She had a loud, surprising laugh that didn't match the rest of her, and she was a little embarrassed by it, which only made me love it more. She read constantly. She remembered the names of people's dogs. She had a way of tilting her head when she was thinking something through. A half-second pause before she spoke, like she was making sure the thing she was about to say was true. She had a whole life. Friends who had known her since childhood. A standing Tuesday dinner she never missed. A plan, a real one, to spend a year abroad after she graduated. She had the city picked out, the language half learned, a map on her wall with a route drawn on it in red pen. I loved all of it. I want that on the record. In the beginning, I loved every part of her that had nothing to do with me, and she loved me. That is the part I need you to understand, because without it, none of the rest makes sense. Sarah loved me, really, freely, with her whole open heart, before anything was ever put on her hand. She chose me. On the mornings I doubt everything else, I do not doubt that. She loved me first, and she loved me true, and that is the only reason she stayed as long as she did through what came after. Because something started to change in me, and it was her love, her real, unforced, stubborn love, that kept her at the table long after a sensible woman would have stood up and gone. It started so small I could tell myself it was nothing. If she took too long to answer a message, Something in my chest would go tight and cold. If she mentioned a name I didn't know, a man from her Tuesday dinners, a friend from the year abroad plans, I would turn it over for hours, working at it like a stone in a shoe. I didn't notice it as suspicion. That's not how it comes. It comes dressed as caring, as wanting to be close, as I just like knowing where you are, as you didn't tell me about him, and I tell you everything. The first real one happened in a cafe. It was crowded, late afternoon, every table full, people coming and going at the counter. We were talking about nothing. She was happy. I remember she was happy. And then there is a gap. I don't mean I forgot the conversation. I mean it is simply not there. One moment we were talking, and the next moment I was back, surfacing, like coming up out of deep water into a room I'd been sitting in the whole time. And Sarah was standing up. She was crying, not loudly, worse than loudly, quietly, the way people cry when they're trying to get out of a public place before it shows. She was gathering her bag with shaking hands, and she would not look at me. And then she was walking away between the tables, fast, her head down. I didn't know what I had said. That is the truth, and it is the worst part. I sat there in that crowded cafe with my heart going hard, and I did not know what had just come out of my mouth, what my face had done, what she had seen looking back at her across that little table. I only knew the result, the woman I loved, walking away from me as fast as she could, and one cold, clear thought underneath everything. She can still leave. I didn't understand why I thought it. I understand now. Some part of me, the oldest part, passed down through all of them, had looked at her walking away and felt not grief, but a kind of offense. That she could. That she was allowed to. She came back that night. I want it remembered that she came back. She found me and let me apologize for a thing neither of us could quite name. I couldn't name it because I didn't remember it, and she didn't want to say aloud what had frightened her so badly. We were young. We loved each other. We wanted it to be all right. So we decided it was. That was the first time she forgave me for something I couldn't remember doing. It was not the last. The second one I do remember pieces of, and the pieces are worse than the gap. It was months later. We were at her flat, late, and she had been on the phone in the other room, laughing, that loud, surprising laugh, with someone from her old life. I don't even know who. It didn't matter who. By the time she came back into the room, I could feel the thing rising in me like cold water up a drain. And I heard myself ask who it was, and I heard my voice come out wrong. Flat. Hard. A voice I didn't choose. And then the room tilted, the way it does, and I caught only flashes after that. Her face changing from confusion to hurt to something I had never seen on her before. Fear. Real fear. Of me. My own hand sweeping a glass off the counter. The sound of it breaking. Very far away, like it was happening to someone else in another room. When I came back, she was pressed into the corner by the window with her arms around herself, and there was broken glass on the floor between us. And she was saying my name over and over, very quietly, like she was trying to call me back from somewhere. Edward, Edward, come back. Please come back. She wasn't afraid I would hurt her with my hands. I want to be clear about that because it's the strangest and most terrible part. She was afraid because she could see that for a moment I had been gone and that something else had been wearing my face. And she didn't know if I would come back. She had started to understand, before I had, that there were two of me. And she stayed anyway that night, and held my hand on the floor among the broken glass, and told me it was all right. It was all right, when it was not all right at all. That was Sarah. That was who she was before. A woman who would sit on a floor of broken glass and try to love a man back into himself. She deserved so much better than what I did next. I went home and read the journal again, all of it, this time by lamplight until it was nearly morning, and I stopped being able to tell myself it was the diary of a disturbed man, because every word of it was a description of me. The tightness in the chest, the names turned over for hours, the voice that came out wrong, the cold thought, she can still leave. That was not grief, but offense. Cornelius had felt all of it 300 years before me. I was not a man with a problem. I was the latest carrier of an old, patient sickness, and it always ended one way. I read the underlined words until I could see them with my eyes closed. It will not make her love you. It will only make her forget that she ever didn't. And God help me, this is the thing I have to live with. When I read those words that night, knowing exactly what they meant, knowing exactly what the pale ring in my father's tin box was, I did not feel only horror. I felt relief, because here at last was a way to stop being afraid she would leave. I gave her the ring 3 weeks later. I told myself a story so I could do it. I told myself it was beautiful, and it was. I told myself it was an heirloom, that giving it to her meant something, that it was love. I did not let myself stand in the same room as the truth, that the gaps were getting worse, that I had seen real fear on her face, that I knew one day she would be right to leave, and here in my hand was the end of that fear forever. She cried when I gave it to her, the good kind of crying. She thought it meant I was choosing her, choosing us, choosing to fight whatever had been wrong. She put it on herself, laughing through the tears, holding her hand up to the light. "It's a little cold," she said. "It'll warm up," I told her. It never did. For a while, I got the thing the oldest part of me had always wanted. I didn't see it happen all at once. It came the way the tide comes. You look up and the beach is smaller and you can't say exactly when. The Tuesday dinners were the first to go. She started finding reasons not to attend. Then she stopped finding reasons. She simply didn't go and didn't seem to notice she'd stopped. The friends who phoned got shorter conversations, then no conversations. One day I realized the phone hadn't rung in weeks. The map came down off her wall. I don't know when. I just noticed one evening that the wall was bare and the red pen route to the city she'd half learned the language of was gone, folded away somewhere, or thrown out. When I asked her about the year abroad, testing it the way you press a sawtooth, she looked at me with a small, puzzled smile, as if I'd brought up something from a stranger's life. "Why would I want to go all the way over there?" she said. "Away from you." And she meant it. That was the thing. She meant it the way my mother had meant, "Why would I want that?" The plan hadn't been argued out of her. It had been quietly deleted, and she didn't miss it because she no longer remembered wanting it. She came home early. She apologized for things that needed no apology. When my face did its terrible thing across the dinner table, and it still did, the sickness didn't stop just because she had. She no longer stood up and walked away. She no longer pressed herself into the corner and called me back. She reached across and took my hand and said she was sorry. She read less. She laughed less. And when she did laugh, the loud, surprising laugh was gone, smoothed down into something quieter, something that wouldn't disturb anyone. She tilted her head less when she was thinking, because she had less and less that she needed to think through. There was less and less of her that wasn't simply mine. I had a whole woman beside me who no longer remembered she had ever wanted to leave. I had become my father. and she had become my mother. I knew it for certain the night I came down and found her at the window, very still, looking out at the road with nothing in her face at all. No longing, not even that. And I remembered being a boy in a kitchen doorway, watching another woman stand exactly like that, surfacing for one breath and then sinking, and I understood that I had done it. I had drawn the shape around her. I had taken the door out of her. The worst part was how peaceful she looked. It will not make her love you. It will only make her forget that she ever didn't. She had loved me, truly, before. And now I could not tell, looking at her, whether what was left was love, or only the ring's long shadow where love used to be. I had taken the one thing I could never give back. I would never again know if she stayed because she wanted to, or because she had forgotten she could want anything else. That was when I started looking for a way out. I went back to the journal, but I already knew it had no answer. Cornelius had carried that question into a burned house and come home empty. There was no way out in those pages, because not one of the men who'd held the book had ever truly wanted one. So I did what I could. I read everything around the edges. I found, pressed between two later pages, a brittle scrap in Cornelius's hand that the others had ignored. A few lines about the woman past the edge of town, about water, about how the only things that old binding ever seemed to fear were deep places and the cold. It wasn't an instruction. It was barely a thought, a frightened man guessing. But it was all I had. And there was a place I had been afraid of since I was a boy without ever knowing why. A stretch of still, dark water past a line of trees, water so flat it never looked natural, deep in a way that had nothing to do with how far down the bottom was. I had always been afraid of it. I think now that some part of me had always known I would end up there. I tried to take the ring back first. I want that written down. It is the only thing I did right, and I did it far too late. She wouldn't let me. Not because the ring fought me. It was only a ring, pale and cold and quiet in the lamplight, because she didn't want it gone. She didn't understand why I would take away the thing that made her feel so safe, so certain, so finished. She cried, the bad kind now, and asked what was wrong with me, and said she was happy. She said it the way my mother had said, why would I want that? And I heard 100 years in it, and I understood that I had done a thing that could not simply be undone. There was no version of leaving she could choose anymore, because I had taken away the part of her that could choose it. But there was a cost coming that I hadn't let myself count. The binding does not loosen for free. The book said so, in the only honest line any of them ever wrote. It had taken hold of more than Sarah. By then there was a child coming, a small room waiting upstairs, and I understood what the price would be taken from, whatever was smallest and newest and least able to refuse. I could not stop that part. I have made my peace with very little in my life, not with that. I never will. I won't write down all of that last night. Some of it belongs only to her and to me, and to the still dark water I had been afraid of since I was a boy. I will only write what it was for. I took her there because I had decided finally to do the one thing none of the men in my blood had ever done. Not to keep, to let go. Cornelius kept, my grandfather kept, my father kept. Every one of them, all the way down, had stood where I was standing and chosen to hold on and called the holding love. I worked the ring from her finger at the edge of that black water. She let me in the end, whatever was left of her, the part that was beginning even then to surface. Let me. and I drew my arm back and threw it as far out as I could, past the bank, past the last of the light, into the deepest part of the dark. It made almost no sound going in, and beside me, Sarah began. Slowly, painfully, like someone coming up out of a long sleep, to remember that she had once been free. She lived. She remembers most of it now. She got her life back in pieces, over a long time. Some of the friends came back. A new map went up on a wall eventually, with a new route on it in red pen. The loud, surprising laugh came back last of all, and the first time I heard it again, I had to leave the room. Some mornings she almost seems happy, and on those mornings I am glad all the way down that I am no longer the center of the shape she lives in. But the house is quieter than a house should be. There is a room in it we do not open, and she does not know. I have never told her. I will never tell her what the breaking cost, or who paid it. By morning the water was flat and black again, the way it had always been. I told myself it was over. The ring was gone. The line ended with me, because I had chosen, for the first time in the history of the men in my blood, to let go instead of to keep. I had been the last one. I had broken it. That is what I told myself for 3 days. On the 4th morning it was on the windowsill, pale, smooth, faintly wet, with a single thread of dark weed still clinging to it, as if a hand had carried it up out of the deep water in the night and set it down, carefully, deliberately, where I would be sure to find it. The fine lines carved into it caught the early light. And I understood, the way Cornelius must have understood standing in the ash of that burned house, that some things do not stay where you throw them, that the blood does not end because one tired man decides he has had enough, that the book would need another page in another hand, and that somewhere already there was a finger the ring was waiting for.